Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am absolutely pumped for today's session. We have a massive number of learners tuning in who are specifically looking to crack the code on some dense, often intimidating material.
And today, we are definitely doing that.
We are tackling the beast that is the NCERT Class 12 economics book. Specifically, we are opening the door to macroeconomics. But before you panic about graphs, equations, and all those confusing news headlines, let me tell you, this is actually the story of how our world works.
It really is. It's the story of money, it's the story of power, and it's about how we all decide to live together as a society. It explains why you have a job or why you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Why a burger costs what it costs and what the government is actually doing with all that tax money it collects.
Right. It's the big picture.
Exactly. Now, for everyone listening, I need to make sure you know exactly what you're getting today. This isn't just a casual summary. This is a special edition, and it's explicitly designed to be UPSC focused by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
And that means it's complete with PYQ linkage.
PYQ linkage. That's previous year questions for anyone who might be new to this.
Which is, it's absolutely crucial. You can't just read the theory in a vacuum. You have to know how the examiners actually think, how they test this stuff. We aren't just here to learn definitions.
No, not at all. We are here to learn how to score marks. It's as simple as that.
100%.
So before we jump into the deep end, I do have a humble request for all of you listening. If you find value in what we're doing, if we help you understand in, say, 1 hour, what usually takes a week of slogging through textbooks, please subscribe to the channel.
It makes a huge difference.
It really does. And if you are capable and want to help us keep the lights on, please consider supporting us on Patreon. That support allows us to keep bringing this super useful content to you. We really rely on that community support to keep the research team going.
We absolutely do. And on that note, a huge shout out to all of our current supporters. You guys are the absolute backbone of this project. You make this possible.
Also, engage with us, like the video, and please share your valuable comments. We do read them, and they actually help the algorithm find other learners just like you who need this kind of breakdown.
The community interaction is key. It helps us know what you need more of.
Okay, one last resource alert before we get started. We have free notes with practice PYQs available right now on our public Telegram channel. But if you want the full experience, and I'm talking access to all the videos in this series at once, plus the premium notes.
Which are a game changer.
They really are. They include detailed breakdowns, tons of extra PYQs, and model mains answers, which is huge. For that, you need to join the private Telegram library.
That's where the real treasure is. Honestly, the model mains answers alone are worth the price of admission.
It's easy to join. Just DM us on the public Telegram channel.
Okay, housekeeping done. Let's dive in. Today's mission is Chapter 1, Introduction. We are specifically looking at sections 1.1, Emergence of Macroeconomics, and 1.2, Context of the Present Book of Macroeconomics.
So we're really going back to the birth of the discipline itself. We are. We have the NCERT textbook in our source stack, and we also have a stack of actual UPSC preliminary mains papers from 2013, 2015, 2022 to, keep us honest. So let's set the stage. Macroeconomics. Why does that word scare people so much?
I think people hear macro and they immediately think math. They think of complex modeling, of equations they didn't understand in school. But fundamentally, macroeconomics is simply the study of the economy as a whole. It's about moving the camera lens back.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because most students, they start with microeconomics. That's usually the first book you pick up in high school or college. What is the fundamental divide here? Why do we even need two different words?
It's a great question, and I think the best way to think about it is the difference between studying a single tree and studying the entire forest. Microeconomics is the study of individual economic agents.
Agents. That sounds like something out of a spy movie, like Agent Smith from The Matrix.
Hey, nothing quite so dramatic, unfortunately. In economics, an agent is just a fancy word for a decision maker.
Okay, a decision maker.
Yeah. It's an individual or an institution that takes economic decisions. So in micro, these agents are usually consumers, like you and me, choosing what to buy based on our tastes and, of course, our income.
Right. Do I buy the fancy coffee or save the money for lunch?
Exactly. That's a microeconomic decision. Or the agents are producers, a company deciding how much to produce to maximize its profit.
So micro is really all about me. What do I want? What can I afford? If I'm a business owner, how do I make the most money?
Precisely. The core motivation in microeconomics is self-interest. You want maximum satisfaction, what economists call utility. The company wants maximum profit. It's all about optimization at the individual level.
But wait, what if we are talking about a massive company? I mean, something huge like Tata or Reliance. Surely they're macro because they're so big they affect the whole country.
That is a really common misconception, and it's a great point to clarify. Even a huge company, a massive multinational corporation, is still considered a micro agent in this context.
Really? Why is that? That seems counterintuitive.
It's because of its goal. It acts for its shareholders. It is not acting for the welfare of the entire country. Its goal is to maximize profit for a specific private set of stakeholders. It's still looking at its slice of the pie, not the whole pie.
Okay, that makes sense. So micro is looking at individual markets. The market for rice, the market for cars, the market for, I don't know, smartphones.
Exactly. It's about supply and demand in one specific area. It sort of assumes that if you understand all the individual parts, you'll automatically understand the whole. But macroeconomics, that's a completely different beast. It argues that's not always true.
So how does macro change the game? What's the shift in perspective?
Macroeconomics looks at the aggregate. That's the key word. It focuses on the total output of the entire economy. It looks at the general price level, not just the price of shoes, but the price of everything averaged out. It looks at employment levels for the whole country, not just for one factory.
So we're moving from looking at a single market's supply and demand curve to trying to imagine a supply and demand curve for everything, for the whole country at once.
Yeah. Yes. And here's where it gets really fascinating. When you step back and look at the whole economy, you start to see patterns that you would completely miss if you were just zoomed in on one market.
Give me an example of a pattern like that.
Well, the NCERT text highlights this really important tendency for variables to move together. So, for example, if the output of food grains rises, usually the output of industrial goods rises too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
People have more food, more money, they buy more things.
Right. And if prices are going up for one thing, they are generally going up for many other things at the same time. That's what we call inflation. If employment is down in the manufacturing sector, it's often down in the services sector too.
So the economy has a mood. It's either happy, it's growing, it's employing people, or it's, depressed, it's shrinking.
That is essentially what macroeconomics analyzes, these general directions of movement. Are we as an economy heading for inflation? Or are we heading for a depression? What is the overall trend?
Now, the text mentions something interesting here to help us understand how we even measure this whole. It's the concept of the representative good. This seems like a massive simplification.
It is, and the text is very open about that. It's a theoretical tool. I mean, in the real world, there are millions, literally millions of different commodities. Rice, steel, haircut, software, education.
You can't track them all individually.
You can't, not in a single model anyway. It would just be too noisy, too complex. So what macroeconomists do is they use a simplification. We imagine a single fictional representative good that reflects the average production of all goods and services in the economy.
So instead of tracking the price of apples and the price of steel and the price of a movie ticket separately, we just track the price level of this imaginary representative good.
Exactly. And the output level of this representative good corresponds to the average production of the whole economy. It allows us to clear away all the noise and see the underlying signal.
Okay, so if this representative goods price is skyrocketing, we have inflation.
Right. And if its production is tanking, we have a recession. It's a useful fiction.
But the source material, the NCERT book, it warns us about this too, right? It says we might overlook vital distinctive characteristics. What does that mean?
It does, and it's an important caveat. For instance, if we treat all labor as just one representative labor, we might fail to distinguish between the problems of, say, a highly skilled software engineer versus a low-skilled factory worker. Their employment situations can be very different.
Right, you could have a boom in tech jobs and a bust in manufacturing at the same time.
Exactly. And lumping them together hides that detail. But for the purpose of understanding the general health of the economy, the big picture, this simplification is the primary tool of macroeconomics.
It's like checking your body temperature. It doesn't tell you if your knee hurts or if you have a headache, but it does tell you if your whole system is fighting a fever.
That is a perfect metaphor. Macroeconomics is the thermometer for the economy.
Okay, so we have the definition down. Micro is the trees, macro is the forest. But did we always think this way? Because the source material has this whole section called Emergence of Macroeconomics. That's section 1.1, which implies that this is actually a relatively new idea.
It is surprisingly modern. I mean, really modern. Before the 1930s, there was no separate subject called macroeconomics. It didn't exist in the universities. The dominant way of thinking was what we now call the classical tradition.
And this is the school of thought that follows Adam Smith, the famous one.
Yes, Adam Smith, who's often called the founding father of modern economics, he wrote The Wealth of Nations way back in 1776. The classical belief was incredibly influential for over 150 years. They believed in the invisible hand.
The idea that if everyone just looks out for themselves, for their own self-interest, society as a whole acts as if it's guided by an invisible hand to a beneficial, efficient outcome.
Correct. The core of their belief was that markets naturally balance. They're self-correcting. They believed in something called Say's law, which essentially states that supply creates its own demand.
Supply creates its own demand. That sounds a bit philosophical. What does that actually mean in practice for, say, a factory owner in 1920?
It's a great question. In practical terms, it means they believed that if you produce something, say a car, you have to pay workers to produce it. You pay for the steel, the labor, the electricity. Those workers and suppliers now have money in their pockets.
Yeah.
And what do they do with that money? They go out and buy things. Maybe not a car, but they buy food, clothes, other goods. So the very act of making stuff, the supply, creates the purchasing power, the demand to buy that stuff. Therefore, they concluded, general overproduction is impossible.
So you can't have a situation where factories are full of things nobody wants to buy.
Not for long, they thought. And a crucial consequence of this is that, in the classical view, widespread long-term unemployment is also impossible. Or at least involuntary unemployment is impossible.
Right. They thought if there was unemployment, it was just a temporary glitch.
A temporary glitch. Exactly. They thought if people are out of work, wages would simply drop. It's just supply and demand for labor. If wages drop, it becomes cheaper to hire people, so business owners would hire them back. The market was viewed as this beautifully efficient, self-correcting machine.
It's a very optimistic, almost utopian view of the world. Don't worry, the market will always fix it.
Until it didn't.
Yeah, the massive reality check, the oh no moment of the 20th century.
The Great Depression of 1929.
This is the pivotal moment in the story of macroeconomics. This is the crisis that gives birth to the entire field.
It completely shattered the classical belief system, because for years the market didn't correct itself. The data from the USA between 1929 and 1933 is just staggering, and the NCERT book lists it explicitly for a reason.
Let's look at those numbers, because numbers in this case tell the story of immense human suffering.
They do. Unemployment in the USA rose from just 3% to 25%.
Wow. 1 in 4 people. 1 in 4 people looking for a job could not find one. Just try to imagine that. You walk down your street, every 4th house has 0 income coming in, the breadwinner is out of work.
And it wasn't just jobs. Aggregate output. The total amount of stuff being produced in the economy fell by 33%. 1/3 of the entire American economy just evaporated.
So under the classical theory, the market should have fixed this. Wages should have plummeted, and then employers would have eagerly hired all these cheap workers back, right?
That was the theory. And political leaders and economists kept waiting. They kept saying, just wait, the invisible hand will show up, it's just around the corner. But the reality on the ground was completely different. Factories stayed idle. People stayed unemployed and became desperate. The market did not self-correct. It got stuck in a terrible equilibrium.
Why? What was the flaw in the logic? Why didn't it fix itself?
Because the theory missed a crucial element, human psychology, fear. When people got scared of losing their jobs, they stopped spending, they hoarded whatever cash they had. When everyone stopped spending, businesses can't sell anything.
And if businesses can't sell their products, they can't hire anyone.
Exactly. Even if wages are incredibly low, who cares if labor is cheap? If you have nobody to buy your product, you'd be hiring people to make things that just pile up in a warehouse. This created a death spiral of falling demand and rising unemployment.
And when the old map doesn't fit the new territory, you need a new map maker. Enter the hero of our macro story, John Maynard Keynes.
A brilliant and somewhat eccentric British economist. In 1936, right in the aftermath of this global crisis, he published a book with a very long and academic title, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money.
A real kitschy title there.
Not exactly a beach raid, no. But it fundamentally changed the world. Keynes basically stood up and said the entire classical framework is wrong. He argued that an economy can get stuck, it can have a long-lasting equilibrium at a point where lots of people are unemployed.
He basically said the invisible hand was broken, it was paralyzed.
Or at least that it needed help. He completely flipped Say's law on its head. He shifted the focus to what he called aggregate demand. He said it's not supply that creates demand, it's demand that drives supply. If people and governments stop spending, the economy enters a death spiral. You have to look at the interdependence of all the different sectors.
And that was it. That was the birth of macroeconomics as a separate, distinct subject. It was born out of a crisis.
It was born to answer a very practical and urgent question. Why did the capitalist system fail so spectacularly? And more importantly, how do we fix it?
So this leads directly to the next point. If the market doesn't always fix itself, who fixes it? This brings us to the next big concept in our outline, the macroeconomic decision makers. The agents.
Right, and this is a huge shift from microeconomics. In micro, as we said, the agents are individuals and firms, all maximizing their own profit or utility. But in macro, we introduce a new, incredibly powerful agent, the state.
When we say the state, we mean the government, right?
Yeah.
But the text says it's also bodies like the RBI.
Yes, the state is a broad term. It refers to the government, so the executive branch, the legislature that passes budgets, but also statutory bodies that are created by law to perform specific functions. The Reserve Bank of India, our central bank, is a key one. So is SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, which regulates the stock market.
And their motivation is completely different. They aren't trying to make a profit.
Hopefully not. Their stated goal is public welfare. That is their reason for existence.
Let's unpack that phrase, public welfare, because it can mean a lot of things. What does the text say it means in economic terms?
In this context, it means pursuing goals that benefit the entire society. It means actively working to reduce unemployment. It means improving access to education and healthcare for all citizens. It also means providing basic public goods like national defense and civil administration, things the private sector wouldn't provide on its own.
This raises an important question. The book explicitly says that while it focuses on a capitalist economy in general, the context is the present book of macroeconomics, which is written for Indian students. The Indian context is different.
Very different. And the book acknowledges this, which is great. India is a developing country.
And the text explicitly says that in a developing country like India, the state has a huge proactive role.
Right.
It's not just about fixing a depression if one happens. It's about fundamentally transforming the society.
Exactly. It's about removing poverty. It's about breaking down social barriers that prevent people from reaching their potential.
Right.
In a fully developed capitalist economy, like, say, the U.S., maybe you can argue the state just needs to set the rules and get out of the way.
Night watchman state.
The night watchman, right. But in India, the state is a major player on the field. It has to intervene to create jobs, to build infrastructure, to provide public goods that the private sector might ignore. No private company is going to build a road to a remote village if it's not profitable. But the state does it for the sake of welfare and national integration.
So given this role, the macroeconomist is constantly asking three big questions, according to the text. Let's list them, because these really frame everything else we learn in economics. Question 1.
Will prices as a whole rise or fall? In other words, are we facing inflation or deflation?
Question 2.
Is the employment condition of the country getting better or worse? That's the jobs report, the unemployment rate. It's about livelihoods.
And question 3, which is the most active and interventionist one?
What steps can the state take to improve the economic performance of the country? And that is policy. That's where you get into fiscal policy, the government's budget, taxes and spending, and monetary policy, what the RBI does with interest rates and the money supply.
Now, speaking of the steps the state can take, okay, let's unpack this. The source material the NCERT took actually gives us some massive real-world examples of the state acting as a macro agent right here in India. These are technically from later chapters 2 and 5, but they're absolutely crucial for understanding this introduction in a modern practical context.
They are the perfect case studies. They show macroeconomics in action. It's one thing to say the state intervenes, and it's a completely different thing to see what that actually looks like on the ground, affecting millions of lives.
The first one is a date every single Indian remembers. November 8, 2016. Demonetization.
A classic, if controversial, example of a massive macroeconomic shock administered directly by the state.
Let's just look at the facts as they're provided in the text. The government of India declared that the existing 500 and 1,000 notes were no longer legal tender.
Just think about the scale of that. Overnight, those two denominations accounted for 86% of the currency in circulation by value.
86%.
The state decided to invalidate 86% of the cash in a heavily cash-dependent economy. It's an intervention of almost unimaginable scale.
Why? What was the stated goal? Because remember, macro agents act for public welfare, not private profit.
The stated goals were threefold: to curb black money, to stop terror funding, which often used high-value fake notes, and to tackle counterfeit currency. These are all, plausible public welfare goals.
And the text is quite balanced on the impact, which is important. It mentions the criticism and the negative consequences.
Yes, it does. It notes the severe short-term adverse impact. We all remember the long queues outside banks, the widespread cash crunch, and the fact that economic activity slowed down significantly because, well, you need cash to conduct transactions, especially in the informal sector.
This goes right back to the system view of macro. You pull one lever, in this case, the money supply, and it has immediate cascading effects on another lever, which is transactions and output.
It's a perfect illustration of that. But the text also mentions the intended long-term shifts. There was a huge push toward digital payments, and the government hoped for better tax compliance as more money entered the formal banking system. It forced a kind of structural change in the economy.
So whether you agree with the policy or not, it is a perfect example of the state manipulating a major macro variable, the money supply, to achieve a broader long-term goal.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
The second big example is GST, the goods and services tax.
This is another massive structural reform, a complete overhaul of the indirect tax system. It was rolled out on July 1st, 2017.
I remember that vividly. The midnight session of Parliament, it was all very dramatic, very historic.
It was, and it had to be, because this wasn't just a simple rule change. It required the 101st Constitution Amendment. This was a fundamental change to the financial relationship between the center and the states.
The slogan for it was "One Nation, One Tax." What problem was it trying to solve?
Before GST, India's indirect tax system was, to put it mildly, a mess, a very complex web of different taxes. You had VAT levied by states, you had service tax and excise duty levied by the center, plus luxury tax, entry tax. It was bewildering. And worse, they cascaded.
Cascaded. You mentioned that word before. Explain what that means in this context. Tax on tax.
Exactly. Tax on tax. Let's say I'm a manufacturer and I make steel. I pay an excise duty on it. Then you, a car maker, buy my steel to make a car. You have to pay VAT on the final car, but the value of your car includes the steel plus the tax I already paid on it, so you end up paying tax on my tax.
Which makes the final product more expensive for the consumer.
Much more expensive. And it made the whole system incredibly inefficient and distorted business decisions. So the state stepped in with this huge macro reform to unify the entire country into a single market.
So the goal was to create that common market, get rid of that cascading effect, and improve the overall ease of doing business in India.
Yes. And the text also mentions a projected result. The expectation was that by making the economy more efficient, GST was expected to raise India's GDP growth by about 2%.
Now, that's a macro prediction. You simplify the tax system, which leads to businesses becoming more efficient, which means production rises, and so GDP goes up. That is macroeconomic thinking in a nutshell.
Perfect.
These two examples, demonetization and GST, they're perfect examples of the state pursuing these big picture goals: transparency, efficiency, growth, that individual micro agents would never and could never achieve on their own. I mean, no individual shopkeeper can decide to unify the national tax code.
Exactly. It requires a macro agent with the authority and the mandate to act for the whole country.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Okay, we promised a link to the PYQs, the previous year questions. We aren't just reading the book, we're trying to crack the exam.
This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we test if you can actually think like an expert. The UPSC exam rarely asks a simple question like, define macroeconomics. That's too easy.
Right. It asks questions that require you to understand the underlying principles: systems, authority, and continuity.
It's about applying the mindset.
So let's start with PYQ Linkage 1. This is from the 2013 Civil Services Prelims, CSP, and it's a question about the Forest Rights Act of 2006.
Okay, set it up for us.
The question asks, who shall be the authority to initiate the process for determining the nature and extent of individual or community forest rights?
A very specific question.
Very specific. And the options are things like A, the State Forest Department, B, the District Collector Deputy Commissioner, C, the Tahsildar. The source actually cuts off the option. So let's focus on the nature of the question itself. It's asking who.
This is a pure question about institutional authority. It's exactly parallel to what we just discussed in macroeconomics. Just like in macro, where we asked, who are the decision makers? The government, the RBI, SEBI. This question asks, who is the specific agent empowered by the state to execute this particular welfare policy?
And the correct answer, for those of you taking notes, is actually the Gram Sabha, the village-level assembly. But the point is not just the answer. The point is that the exam wants you to identify the correct agent for the job.
Precisely. In our NCERT text, we learned that the RBI is the agent for monetary policy and SEBI is the agent for the stock market. In the exam, you need to know which agent handles forest rights. It's the exact same skill, mapping authority to a specific function. If you confuse the RBI with the finance ministry, you lose marks in economics. If you confuse the collector with the Gram Sabha here, you lose marks in polity.
It's all about knowing the org chart of the state and its functions.
Yeah. Who does what?
Let's look at another one. This one is wildly different on the surface. It's from geography, also from the 2013 CSP.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, macroeconomics is all about systems thinking, and so is geography.
Okay, the question asks, which of the following are responsible for bringing dynamic changes on the surface of the Earth? And then it gives you a list of 6 forces. 1, electromagnetic radiation. 2, geothermal energy. 3, gravitational force. 4, plate movements. 5, rotation of the Earth. 6, revolution of the Earth.
And the options ask you to choose which combination of these forces is responsible.
It's basically asking, is it just one or two of these things, or is it everything working together?
This is a perfect parallel to the idea of general equilibrium in macroeconomics. In micro, you might look at one price in isolation. But in macro, you have to see that interest rates, wages, profits, and prices are all interconnected and they all move together. In this geography question, the Earth is the economic system.
So does the rotation of the Earth affect the surface? Does gravity, they seem so abstract compared to a volcano.
Yes and yes. Absolutely. Gravity causes erosion, landslides, and it drives the tides. Rotation causes the Coriolis effect, which shapes global wind and ocean currents, which in turn cause erosion. Plate movements build mountains. Geothermal energy drives volcanoes. The answer is likely all of the above, or a very broad combination. The point is, you have to see the aggregate effects of multiple forces all working simultaneously.
That's a really cool way to look at it. You can't just isolate one variable and say, this is the cause. It's a macro system.
Exactly. If you only look at plate tectonics, you miss the erosion caused by gravity and wind. If you only look at interest rates, you might miss the inflation being caused by a global supply shock like a war. You have to be able to look at the whole dashboard.
Okay, let's move to mains. This is a question from 2015, GS Paper 1. It's a culture question, but I want you to apply your macro brain to it.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
The prompt is, the ancient civilization in the Indian subcontinent differed from those of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece in that its culture and traditions have been preserved without a breakdown to the present day. Comment.
Oh, that is a deep question. The key phrase there is preserved without a breakdown.
So how on earth does this relate to economics?
Think about the concept of the long run versus the short run, and more importantly, the resilience of systems.
Oh, go on. I'm listening.
In our NCERT text, we spent a lot of time discussing the Great Depression. The classical economic system broke down, it faced a shock it couldn't handle, the whole intellectual framework collapsed, and a new system, the Keynesian system, had to be built from the ashes.
Right, it was a catastrophic failure.
This history question is asking the same thing, but in reverse. Why did the Indian system, its culture, its traditions, not collapse like the Egyptian or Mesopotamian systems did? It's asking about the resilience of the institutional and social framework.
So just like an economy needs a strong state or robust institutions to weather a depression a civilization needs?
What makes it resilient? That's the core of the question. Maybe it's a strong social fabric, or highly adaptable religious and philosophical traditions, or a decentralized way of preserving knowledge through families and communities rather than a centralized state. It's asking you to analyze the macro structure of Indian civilization that allowed it to absorb and survive the massive shocks of history invasions, famines, colonial rule, political changes.
That is a fascinating connection. It's about systemic resilience versus systemic fragility.
It is. And in the context of our textbook, remember how Indian macroeconomics places a special emphasis on welfare and social goals? Perhaps that continuity of prioritizing the social fabric, the collective, is part of the answer. A rigid top-down system breaks easily. A resilient, adaptable, decentralized system bends but doesn't break.
Let's do one more PYQ linkage. This one is all about the importance of specific knowledge.
Precision matters. The big picture is built on accurate details.
The question asks about the difference between chekchas and viharas in the context of Buddhist rock-cut architecture.
A classic art and culture question. Comes up all the time.
The options are basically debating which one is a place of worship and which one's a dwelling place for monks.
Right, they try to confuse you. Is A, Vihara the place of worship and Chaitya the dwelling? Or is it B, Chaitya is the place of worship and Vihara is the dwelling?
So why does this matter in a macro discussion? This seems as micro as it gets.
Because it highlights the absolute necessity of precise definitions. In the NCERT Chapter 2, which is previewed in our source material, there is a massive and crucial difference between GDP, gross domestic product, and GNP, gross national product. They sound similar, but they measure different things.
Oh, right. One is domestic, everything produced within the borders of a country, and the other is national, everything produced by the citizens of a country wherever they are in the world.
Exactly. And if you mix those two up in an exam, or worse, in actual policymaking, you get the wrong answer. You get the wrong data, you make the wrong decisions. Similarly, if you mix up Chaitya, which is the prayer or worship hall, and Vihara, which is the monastery or dwelling, you lose the marks.
So the takeaway here is, macro requires big picture, systems thinking. But that big picture is built on a foundation of precise, accurate definitions of the components.
Exactly right. You can't understand the aggregate if you don't know what the individual pieces are. The Chaityas and Viharas are the micro components of the larger Buddhist complex. You need to identify them correctly to understand the function of the whole site. If you call the kitchen the church, you're going to have a very confusing Sunday service.
A very fair point. So what does this all mean? We have covered a huge amount of ground today.
We really have. We started with a simple textbook definition, and we've ended up analyzing the long-term resilience of entire civilizations.
Let's just recap the journey for everyone.
We established that macroeconomics is the study of the whole. It's the forest, not the trees. It emerged as a separate field because the old way of thinking, the classical micro-based view, completely failed to explain or solve the catastrophe of the Great Depression.
The invisible hand stopped working, so we needed the visible hand of the state to step in.
And that state, especially in a developing country like India, isn't just a passive referee. It's an active agent on the field, fighting unemployment, building infrastructure, and sometimes managing massive economy-wide shifts, like demonetization or the GST rollout.
And finally, we saw that to crack the UPSC exam, you need to be able to apply this macro mindset, this ability to look for systems, authority, and continuity across all subjects, from geography and polity to history and culture.
It really is a way of thinking, not just an academic subject. It's about seeing the interconnectivity of things and understanding the big picture.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought, a final nugget to chew on as you continue your studies.
Go for it.
The text mentions Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations from 1776 and his powerful view on self-interest. It says that if every individual pursues their own profit, the nation as a whole gets wealthy.
The classical view, the magic of the market.
But then, the text immediately pivots, especially for us in India, and says, in a developing country like India, the state must intervene for social goals. It must pursue welfare.
Correct. A direct contrast.
So here's the question for you to think about. As India grows, as we aim to become a $5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy, does the state's role shrink? Do we eventually get so developed that we can go back to Adam Smith's vision of a minimalist state and the invisible hand? Or, as the economy gets bigger and more complex, does the state's role become even more important, even more complex?
That is the ultimate question of political economy for the 21st century. I mean, the old 20th century view is that development meant a linear path from state control to free markets. But just look at the world today. Climate change, global pandemics, massive inequality, the regulation of artificial intelligence. These are all enormous macro problems that markets, left to their own devices, simply cannot solve alone.
So maybe the age of Keynes isn't over at all. Maybe it's just evolving into a new form.
I think that's a brilliant way to put it. The state's role doesn't disappear. It just changes. Perhaps it moves from being a direct provider of goods to an enabler of markets and then to a regulator of complex systems. But the macro oversight, that is absolutely here to stay. We can't afford another Great Depression, virtual or real.
Something to think about as you study. It's not just about passing an exam. It's about understanding the future of governance itself.
Indeed.
All right, learners, that is a wrap on this deep dive into NCERT Macroeconomics Chapter 1.
A dense but absolutely essential chapter to get right.
If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want to keep cracking these codes with us, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP on YouTube. It helps us immensely to grow the channel.
And if you can, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It truly does keep the lights on and allows us to keep the content coming. We really do appreciate every single backer.
Don't forget to check the public Telegram channel for those free notes and the PYQs we discussed today. The link is in the description.
And for the most serious aspirants, we will see you in the private library. The premium notes are waiting for you.
Like, comment, share. Let us know in the comments what clicked for you today. Until next time, keep learning.
Goodbye and good luck.
Signing off.